Welcome, everybody.
Oh. I know.
Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here with us. I'm about to get started. Glad that some folks are enjoying the music. That was Super Blue. The name of that song is Super Bloom by Mr. Wives, if you're curious. And I'm Rebecca. I'm the communications person here at Round Sky Solutions. Thanks for joining us for our introductory webinar on sharing power in cooperative meetings. And you're in the right place if you're wanting to be able to share power, share the decisions, the space, and the work in your team. And that's a practice. It gets out of balance. Collaboration can be hard. We believe and experience that it gets easier with skills and patience and tools that can help hold us and you and our teams in complexity. And we know that it's worth it and part of the answer to our most pressing challenges. And one thing that I reflect on often is that a client of ours shared after working with us, they didn't realize that sharing leadership and cooperating could be learned. They thought that they just had to have the right type of personality and in order to collaborate and share power, but that's not the case, or we believe that's not the case. And they were surprised and pleased to learn that. So with that, many of you know us, but I want to share a few things for those that don't, and maybe just a reminder. So one is that Round Sky Solutions is a remotely operated worker-owned cooperative, meaning we're a business where the workers own it together. And we believe that there are two main training opportunities when thinking about shared leadership and facilitation capacity to share power, which I think is a little unique to us. One is the tools and processes, and two are personal development. So if we had the perfect tools, I'm not saying that we do or that those exist, that doesn't really matter if we're not continuously building self-awareness, building groundedness, emotional intelligence into our facilitation and self-awareness about sharing power. So we think those two things are particularly important, and that's what we focus on. And that leads me to the second piece I want to tell you. We approach our courses and training similarly to that focus with both the hard schools and quote, soft skills and personal development, along with somatic practices. And our main strategic initiative that might be familiar to you is the Cooperative Leadership Certification Program. And our students and clients have helped shape this training, and together we've really pinpointed the key pieces for sharing power, or some of those key pieces, and use your meetings in a way that is in line with cooperative values. So you'll hear us talk about some of the tools that we teach within the training as an introduction to that, to support shared power. And if what we're offering resonates with you and you'd like to approach your facilitation in this manner, talk to me. We can have an interview to see if it's the right fit for you. And applications are due this Friday. And many of us are on Zoom these days, but I'll just go over some logistics. First off, this session is being recorded, as you got the announcement, and shared with everyone after this call. And feel free to put your questions in the chat box. If you have a tech issue or a curiosity, we'll do our best to get to them. And that should pop up, but I'll say hello in case you haven't seen it pop up on your screen. And we'll leave some time for questions at the end. Also, if you can, please stay on mute. Our mics are really good at picking up our sounds, so try to stay on mute unless you are speaking up purposefully. And then we have an hour, so we have till the end of the hour, which is 12 my time central, and you may leave with questions, and that's okay for us, and you can always email me and we have more. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Daniel, who's going to help get us grounded and present today.
Good day, everyone. Nice to see you all. Welcome. One of the things that I'm feeling about sharing power in our work is the importance of being really personally grounded and really arriving, for ourselves. How can we share power if we don't have kind of sense our own feet under us in a certain way, right? And so we pay a lot of attention to our bodily experience and somatics in our trainings as a way to, enhance participation and facilitation. And so let's do just a tiny bit of that today. I'll offer a few suggestions for quieting our bodies and our minds, but if my suggestions work for you, that's great. If not, just do whatever helps you just arrive and feel more settled and resourceful in yourself. So, yeah, you might soften your gaze. You could close your eyes if you like. And I usually like to start with my feet. It's just a great grounding feeling to just feel my feet on the floor, and that little sense of like compression, is the weight of my legs and my feet, or if I'm standing, like more weight kind of compressing my feet against the floor. That sense of contact, like a sense of boundary between myself and the objects that are supporting me. Maybe then I'm also noticing, oh, I'm sitting in this chair and I feel the pressure of the chair against my legs and my back. And as I notice that kind of ground under me, you might start to pay attention to your breath. Like, where does your breath go? What's happening with that? And maybe a deeper breath, a little sigh or a sound, a little hum. Yeah, so just settling and noticing. What else helps you feel grounded and present and ready to begin? So take a moment to inwardly use whatever you know about yourself to help you settle into being here and present. And then from there, I like to bring our attention like up and out a little bit, perhaps opening your eyes softly and looking around the space that you're in, just noticing and kind of, what's here, what's around you, just kind of locating yourself in space and time, maybe picking one object in the room where you are just to really observe that, or a sound to really hear that. And then turning that attention back to this sense of we're all here together, like, wow, who are all these people like on this call, also interested in this topic of sharing power in a way that's healthy and just. Yeah, here we are. All right, so thank you.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. That was helpful and nice to take a moment to look at all your faces a little more intentionally and names. Thank you for being here. And as we approach this topic of sharing power, Daniel just offered a somatic practice that can be helpful for you to tune in, use it as a resource for yourself and your group and how you want to show up, or simply noticing how you are showing up. And that is one of the pieces of our work also that we include. We think it's important and really connected to how we tend to power dynamics, generative, harmful, and everything in between. And so now I want to give us some space on this call to get to know each other. An important part of our work is community. And we're going to put folks in breakout groups. So introduce yourself as you feel comfortable. Some suggestions are to share your name, pronouns, location, organization you're connected with if you are, and what brought you here today. And also share a power dynamic or issue that you're experiencing that you would like to address, or at least explore today with us. And before you do that, Daniel and I will model our own intros, and then I'll put you in the breakout rooms. So I'm Rebecca, she, hers, and I live in Bulbancha, AKA New Orleans. And today I'm feeling really grateful to be a part of this conversation because cooperative facilitation skills and tools have come up in so many contexts of my life, and sharing power together is something I've come back to over and over. It's definitely a practice, not a static thing. And these tools that I've learned from Brown Sky really do offer some helpful frameworks for holding space for team members and learning as we go and practicing not expecting perfection. And a power dynamic that I'm reflecting on is a challenge with engagement, getting a team to really be engaged with what we're doing together. So curious about that. How about you, Daniel?
Thanks, Rebecca. Welcome. Yeah, so I'm Daniel, he, him. I live in unceded Abenaki territory, which is the state of Vermont, and one of the facilitators and coaches here at Round Sky. One of the things about working in groups that I'm really aware of is like whether people are feeling included. It's kind of a dynamic that maybe I'm hyper aware of that because of like getting picked last for gym class teams or something like that. I was, some old stuff there. But today I'm excited to play with the link between sharing power and actual practices for including people into building like our agenda for what are we going to even talk about? How do we create inclusivity there? And a power dynamic that I'm aware of lately is the way that urgency makes it hard to slow down, and how that can limit that full participation in decision making if we're going too fast or not really able to attend to each other. Yeah, so that's me.
Thanks, Daniel. All right, I put the prompts in the chat box for your reference, and I'm going to open the rooms, and we'll see you back in a few minutes. If you're having trouble joining the room, let me know.
Folks in the Syracuse Cultural Workers Cooperative who are there together, maybe you all could just chat, be in your own, you could even just stay here in the main room and just be on mute and talk with each other. Does that make sense, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think so.
Because there's a bunch of you there I see on your video, so welcome, and maybe just quickly introducing some of those elements to each other.
Yeah, thank you. That's what we'll go ahead and do.
Great. Nice. And I will put some light music on while we do that. Say welcome, Heather. Welcome. Folks are in breakout rooms introducing themselves. They're coming back pretty soon. But if you want to share in the chat box, the prompts are on the screen. Share your name, pronouns, location, organizations that you're connected with, and what brought you here today. And if you're willing, a power dynamic that you're wanting to address. And you can also write that down for yourself if you'd like. We'll be discussing power dynamics a little later. So this is your time to reflect on that as well.
Recorded.
Welcome back. Good to see you all. I think we may have a few seconds left. Welcome, welcome. Nice. How was that? Anybody want to share a theme or something something that felt alive from that? Maybe one or two people from your shares, connections you had.
I'll go.
Great.
So we had Bob from Scotland and Naya, I forgot where she was from, and the range of organizations were from hundreds of people to 60 people to my organization that's like 13, 14 people. So it's interesting realizing that on scales, but happy to all be here for some reason to learn more.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure we have a huge range here also. Your small group shows just a snippet of that. Anybody else want to share any? Hafida, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I'll say Becca and I met, and we're on opposite ends of the United States, but a thing that kind of came up for us was just power. And I thought Becca made a really good insight about how I summarized it is that a lot of people don't understand how to participate, like be fully participatory, unless or without being in charge. So it's sort of like this dynamic, this binary of like, I'm either running everything or I'm kind of just following along. And there's that in between, I think, is probably why we're here, trying to figure that out.
That's a great distinction that, I mean, it's not useful to think about it as this or that also, that often we're on the spectrum. Thank you for sharing that. Looking forward to hearing how that evolves throughout today and your thinking around that. And looking forward to hearing from other people too. Feel free to put any insights you have or surprises, themes that you want to share in the chat box. And I'll keep going. So sharing power is a big topic. I'm sure we're all thinking about different things also as we're here today about what power means. And it's also really energizing to talk about power because there's so many possibilities when we're in this work together, when our teams are aligned, when we're really flowing, the energy is bubbling, and we really can do so much together. Like I can feel like the bubble up as I even talk about it and think about it. And it's, like I said earlier, it's definitely a practice. It's dynamic. It's not static. We don't share power and then we have it forever together. And often teams get misaligned or worse, misaligned. And then there's these huge power imbalances that reveal themselves. Or sometimes just small power dynamics that get in the way. And either way, it can feel really isolating and disappointing to be doing solidarity economy work and be in a cooperative and have this uncomfortable, stagnating, or harmful power dynamic show up. Like the people building a new economy are even struggling with us or with this. But of course this happens. And also if this is resonating with you, you're not alone. We're all immersed culturally in some deeply harmful patterns, largely due to exploitative capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy that are based on hoarding leadership and power, and that binary that was mentioned earlier. And I name this because it certainly influences how we share power and leadership in our teams, even cooperative run teams. And these ways of being are run deep and show up. So we have a lot to unlearn and unlearn it over and over again. And we believe that one way to approach sharing power and realigning is through collective tools and processes. And these processes can hold us in a container when things get misaligned, when power gets imbalanced, or just stagnating, like we're stuck together. And of course, there's lots of ways to approach power. And I encourage you to combine this with your own knowledge and understandings today. And we found that having a practical understanding of how power works and where it flows and some shared language can be really useful, a useful map to think about how you might realign and when you need to do so. So Daniel is about to share a little bit more about this. It's called we call it the Power Matrix, this tool that we use to help navigate power dynamics. And in addition to that, we also think about other facilitation tools and containers that can help us share power together, which we're not going to get too deep into, but I just want to name them. That one is who has power to make which decisions. That's a big thing with sharing power in teams, knowing where your boundaries lie and giving people autonomy. And also collective decision-making processes, knowing how to hold the power collectively. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Daniel to talk a little bit more about the power matrix.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I wanted to start off first, like, what are we even talking about power? I just wanted to say that, you know, at Round Sky, in our work with CoLab, we really think of power as a pretty neutral thing. You know, like it has a lot of, it's like we want to think about it in terms of like, is it healthy? Is it working like in a way that's healthy and generative, or is it a way that it's working that's unhealthy, harmful, and, you know, not working, you know? And but the power itself is just like a resource. It's just you know, the force of life moving through us in a sense, and trying to move and get things done and achieve things and stuff like that, right? So so we see it as the power itself as neutral, where it's just how is it used, and is it healthy? Yeah. So we developed this tool called the Power Matrix. One of our co-founders, Cecile Green, actually came up with this when she's doing a deep dive into this stuff. And one of the key elements of working in a healthy way with power is the dialogue between, and it really is a dialogue, a conversation between the needs of the individual and the needs of the collective. Over time and across cultures, we've come up with a lot of different ideas about how these two forces, in a sense, should be in relationship to each other. And in the power matrix, we show that in a spectrum, in a sense. We have this vertical line in the power matrix, which is with autonomous power at the top and collective power down at the bottom. And we see autonomous power as the power that's, you know, that any given individual in a group or a role within an organization has to influence the matters of their work and their life. For example, a nonprofit director could have the clear authority to define priorities for their department or something, right? Or a designated facilitator in the group has a power to guide the group, to be the guide, to group, you know, to take the group through a group decision-making process. Yeah. And then we think of collective power as the power that a group or a community has over their life and work together. You know, for example, Cooperative's membership has the power to vote on what's, you know, they have, you know, some proposals made and they get them to vote, you know, so that's a collective expression of power. Or a worker's self-directed team has to decide the best way to fulfill the work that they're responsible for. They're going to collectively work together to make that, to exercise the power of their team. And the other distinction in the power matrix that's helpful for creating healthy power, for understanding this, is to investigate the expression of power on a spectrum from implicit to explicit. And when we think of explicit, we're talking about the clear, spoken, written, some otherwise agreed upon, these sanctioned, you know, forms of power. In other words, the authority, say, given to the role of a financial lead to make many financial decisions. You know, they have a scope of authority. They have the autonomous power within the authority to just do what their job is, in a sense, right? Yeah. Implicit, though, is like the hidden, unspoken, or the assumed forms of power, right? Say the ability of a strong or persuasive personality to have more influence on the decisions that they're a part of. Yeah. Or sometimes founders or longstanding members have an implicit power because they hold the history of the organization, and people often look to them for direction. Race, gender, education, age, and lots of other identity factors can show up as implicit form of power in our teams, depending on how intentionally the team is working with those factors and how conscious they're being of bringing those things forward, that they may be very implicit. Yeah, so that's an initial bit.
Daniel, I think this layers really well with other analyses. Also, like I said, use your own analyses around power and layer it, like with what you already know. And with the power matrix, as Daniel said, we believe that power is not inherently bad, that power just is, and it really depends on how we're using it in real situations. And it's the question is this a healthy or unhealthy expression, or whatever, where on the spectrum is this really serving us? And it's not that autonomous power is harmful always, but it can be stagnating if a person is having more power over their work or over the work of the group and more sway than other people in ways that aren't working for the team. Or sometimes it's really, useful to have that charismatic leader to push the organization forward. And this all shifts over time about what's feeling generative and what's not. We need good boundaries over our work. And it's also not that collective power is always good. It can also stagnate a group from moving forward. If everyone is making all decisions together, it can start taking away from people's autonomous power to really serve the whole and really show up in beautiful ways. So we're having a conversation, not autonomous versus collective, but where on the spectrum does it really serve us to do this work together? So we want to get into an example and analyze some of the power dynamics that are happening, and then you all will get a chance to use your own example as well. So keep this in mind as we go through this. So Daniel, what is the power dynamic that you'd like to address today?
Yeah, let's imagine this scenario, okay? It's kind of a founder syndrome, seniority kind of thing. So our organization has been around for a while. We're getting kind of stagnant. We're not like growing and moving very effectively anymore. So we brought in a whole bunch of new people, not a whole bunch, we brought in a bunch of new people, and we made this team of new people and old people to really chart some new directions for the organization. On this team, one of the longstanding members, Jim, he's well liked. He's been here for a bunch of years. I can really see that people go to Jim for support and advice. He really knows the history of the place. He's good with people. Some of the staff really appreciated how he was able to like informally help them get up to speed during their onboarding process. But it's been a number of months, and this need for change is still really pressing. And some of the newer folks on this team who are working with this change process with Jim are really starting to get frustrated. They're frustrated with him for the influence he has as they work on decisions for new directions. There's this growing frustration about their lack of influence to move change forward, while Jim's perspective seems to still get a lot of traction.
Thank you for sharing. And I'm curious, what are you seeing about this dynamic using the power matrix about what's happening explicitly or implicitly with the power dynamics you're experiencing?
Yeah. So when I look at the situation, I could say that Jim has a lot of implicit power. His seniority with the organization gives him the history and his ability with people. He derives a lot of power to sway things in the directions that he feels would be good. And meanwhile, the team has been given the explicit power to make some decisions about the new directions.
What about autonomous and collective? What are you seeing on that spectrum?
Right. Well, it's most obvious that Jim has a lot of autonomous power, really, to like slow things down or resist change, basically, and that Jim's frustrated colleagues are developing a sense of collective power implicitly, in a sense, as they start to talk with each other and begin to coordinate some kind of a response.
Right, processing what's happening, what do they want to do about it?
Yeah.
And just a small, like, little teaching moment. In general, we're using this tool to think about how to understand the situation and what do we want to do about it. We can map it out and then ask some questions about, are there implicit things here would be helpful to change, to make explicit. That's often what we do, but I could see it going the other direction for some examples. And also, how is the balance between autonomous and collective power working for us in this specific situation? So with that, what do you think would make this dynamic healthier, more generative? Are there implicit things to make explicit here, Daniel?
Yeah. Well, I'm imagining that just naming the ways that Jim's history with the organization is influencing things might be helpful. And mainly, it sounds like the team needs to get much more explicit about the process they're using to make decisions, so that they can have inclusivity, but they can actually get decisions made too. In other words, Jim's autonomous power could be moderated by enhancing the explicit collective power of the team's decision-making process, ensuring they have a process that gathers the needed viewpoints and not letting anyone dominate, intentionally or not.
Yeah. And what do you see anything you kind of already started saying this, but is there anything more you want to say about the autonomous and collective spectrum that you could see shift here?
Right. These things overlap, of course. The
Right.
some of Jim's autonomous power might need to be shifted to clear collective processes for making decisions. And the key is creating a workable balance, right? Creating a workable balance of shared power and the power that we give to certain roles, using the collective power to get clear, using the collective power to get clear about how autonomous power functions in the organization. In other words, what decisions need to be made collectively in this team and which ones need to be made autonomously based on, clear roles and within the team.
Nice. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah.
So now we want to give,
No, go ahead.
I would say now we want to give folks a chance to use the example, the dynamic you wanted to address, or another one that's popping up for you, and work through this in pairs and see what could come up. So we have some guiding questions. Okay. Introduce the power dynamic. What dynamics were at play? Where does it lie on the two spectrums? What's explicit or implicit? What's autonomous? What's happening collectively? And how can you use the power matrix to understand how you'll shift power? Does something implicit want to be more explicit here? Does something would it be helpful to become more autonomous or more collective, or maybe a little bit of both in those situations? So I will copy this and put it in the chat box and let you have some seconds to think about that while I organize you in your breakouts. Use this time to think about what you want to say.
Yeah, we'll have about 8 minutes total, maybe a little less, just a few minutes to share with each other and to get into this a bit.
Good question. You are discussing one of your own. If you would prefer to discuss this one, you can talk more about that, but the invitation is for your own. I'm almost done. Okay. Okay, we'll see you. You have about 3-ish minutes each, 3.5. And we'll see you back here. All right. For folks that are in here, I know that some folks asked to be excluded, but I'm realizing that maybe not everybody got a breakout room.
Yeah, if anyone's in the main room would like to be in a big breakout room, if you could chat to us or just speak up, that'd be great. We'll try to set that up.
Hi, yes, I'm sorry. I got disconnected. This is Diamond Mosley. I would like to be put into a breakout room.
Okay, great. How do I add a group?
If it's
We could-
helpful, this is Annie. Sorry, if I'm happy to be in a breakout group with Diamond if that's helpful for numbers. I didn't ask to be excluded, but either way is fine with me.
I think I messed up here that I didn't realize there was some assigned. So let's actually use this space. If you are willing, we'll stop the recording. And we could talk here. Is that okay with?
Recording.
Yeah, thank you both for using this big room space, working with my technical challenge there. And definitely not enough time, everybody, sorry, to bring you back. I'm sure you are having great analyses happening. And I'd love to hear from one person, maybe a couple people in the chat box or more, but anybody want to share any reflections from your breakout room? Feel free to just unmute yourself and share.
So I'm Andy, he, him pronouns, Syracuse Cultural Workers, and we're in the process of transforming from a single proprietorship business to a worker collective. So all of these things are very live for us now. And yeah, and this tool is quite useful for us as we work on that transition. And one of the pieces we're talking about is that the owner / founder is giving the business to the workers, but exactly what his role is going to be in a more ongoing way is not so clear. So dealing with those dynamics, because however he stays involved, that implicit power piece will remain really strong. And so figuring out ways to both benefit from his history and background and knowledge and expertise, but not letting him kind of dominate and control is we've been talking about.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. That is a balance, a dynamic one. Definitely I'm nodding alongside you here. Thanks for sharing. And other people please do share in the chat box. And we want to introduce one more tool for you to think about how to share power in your meeting specifically. So off to you, Daniel.
Yeah. A lot of groups struggle with one team member holding a lot of power, even if they're run collaboratively, right? Or they don't know how to get others to step into leadership. One of the tools that we teach is a participant-led and built agenda. This really deepens member participation in meetings, and we call this tension-driven meetings. It's a practice we learned from Holacracy. Tension-driven meetings provide a place for everyone to name what they want to see addressed, basically, and to kind of own that topic in the discussion and in the decision making. Let's look at the word tension. We're using the word tension to mean something about something that a team member is sensing, and then we're back to like the somatics too. Like, are we sensing what's going on for us? Like, what's happening here? There's something that the team member wants to announce or discuss or decide something about. We're all sensing things, whether we name it or not. So let's have a place and an agreed upon process for getting those things named. To make the link between tension-driven meetings and the power matrix, a key idea in the power matrix is if we want to create change in an organization, it's important to examine the patterns that are implicit and to make them explicit so that we can consciously try out new ways of running our organization that are more generative for everyone. And tension-driven meetings provide a powerful setting for that kind of work. So tensions, I see tensions as in a sense, a trapped or potential creative energy, creative action Sometimes we use this archery metaphor where each person's creative contribution is their arrow and their tension is them, like, pulling back the bowstring in a sense, right? And as a facilitator in a collective context, our job is to support people in surfacing or bringing up those tensions, but then also helping to make them effectively guide them through, activities that will process that tension, that will move it forward, helping the arrow find its target. And we can leverage the power somatics here. We're probably familiar with that term, feeling the tension in the room, although it's not always, it's negative or something to avoid. It's something to name and invite, and even tensions can even be pleasurable, right? Excitement, but for a new opportunity is a tension just as much as a painful feeling, stuck feeling, or something like that. So in my example with Jim earlier, tension-driven meetings might be a fantastic way to shift power from implicit to explicit by adopting a really clear process tool for including other perspectives. And it would give everyone on the team more voice, shifting power from autonomous to collective. Yeah.
Yeah, tensions are one of my favorite parts of our tools for sharing power in meetings. And I'll share a little bit about why that is. So one of the things I love is that by making the agenda tension driven, where people are directly giving input from the group to the agenda, it means that one person's not holding the agenda and having to prepare tons of stuff in advance. So the collective is really holding it. And the collective has power to decide what gets talked about, not just what's put on the agenda, but what gets prioritized. And what's powerful about this is that the person bringing that tension, we call them the tension holder, that person gets to decide when it's resolved and what's needed. And often in groups outside of the processes that we use, I see that facilitators do gather input for agenda items from their team. And that's kind of when I see it stop, that they don't always come back to that person who brought the item and ask them, okay, you brought this, what were you hoping to get out of it? Let's make sure that what you brought is addressed, because somebody may bring up a topic, but everyone might have a different idea about how to address it. And it's really that person who brought it knows what might move it forward. They don't have to have the answer, but they have a sense of what's going to address their tension. So we give them the power to decide that, not the facilitator, which is a shift that I see that can be really powerful. And it also means the facilitator doesn't have to guess whether or not it's relevant or the thing that happens in the meeting. So that can be really helpful too, sharing the power and the responsibility. And then it really depends on engagement from your team. It requires it and requires alignment and works with that process as well. So we're coming up on our time. So I just want to wrap up this webinar with a quick summary. So we've offered the power matrix, as you know, and this is a tool you can use to visualize and shift and continue the conversations you had today. Tension-driven meetings is a process that gives power to those attending your meetings, and we have some stuff on tension-driven meetings on our website. Also, I can put that in the chat box if you're interested. Let me know. And there are some other areas to tend to for sharing power. Like I said earlier, your decision-making processes, accountability loops, use somatics, personal development practices to support how you show up to share power in your group. And this is all of these pieces are included in our course. So if you want to go deeper with peers on the power dynamics and facilitation, I know our course best, and it works in lots of really powerful ways for people. So feel free to reach out if you have questions about that. The application's super easy and it's due on Friday, and I'll put that in the chat box. But now I want to leave our last few minutes, and I can stay on a little bit longer if other people have questions that don't get answered, but I want to open up the floor for questions now. And I already see some questions in the chat box. I'm going to go to those first. Let's see. Let me read them. So the question is, I've heard of having specific tension meetings? Are you all suggesting to use that frame for all meetings? Daniel, do you want to?
Sure.
Answer
Yeah. I
that.
mean, not necessarily. You might have a meeting that you've arranged ahead of time that's going to be on a specific topic, right? Like that's certainly possible and doable. But in general, we're recommending, yes, that we know what to focus on based on what our sensors throughout the organization are telling us, in a sense. Like on a team, like if everyone's sensing what needs addressing, then we're dealing with the real and actual, matter, material of our current reality, in a sense. So yeah, pretty mostly, but not, of course, exclusively.
Hopefully, if you have follow-up questions, please add that. And we have another question: how to balance tension-driven agendas with the need to move forward on a specific project or process?
Yeah. Do you want me to go? You want me to be the question answer, or do you want to?
Yeah, I might add some, but
Okay. Cool.
yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's a specific project that needs a bunch of attention, I might have a specific meeting for that project. And then, but how we're going to move that project forward might be tension driven. Like everyone who's a part of that project knows what they need to get resolved to move the project forward. So I might focus the meeting on the project, but have the material be tension driven within it, potentially, Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And often our team members really know what need to be talked about in terms of a specific project. So instead of one person having to think of all the things that we need to talk about for that project, it can be really helpful to share that. And you learn a lot from your team in that as well. And there's another question. Does it make sense to decouple status checks from decisions, or to have specific decision-making sections of meetings?
Yes, it does make a lot of sense. We would get into this in our training, but we have a whole meeting flow, which we call the standard meeting practice, very original name. But in that flow, we have a section called ops reports, right? Where we're doing our status checks. And we're really just like boom, 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 let's get the status clear. And out of that, we might have tensions, like the tensions might come up, and then we put that on the agenda section so that we can process the tensions. But we don't like try to make decisions in the middle of the status report, because then the status report takes forever and we don't get through it. And we input the decisions, or other things, discussions, things that need like to have real attention, like more dedicated attention, go as agenda items in that section of the meeting. Yeah. So I does think it makes sense to separate those things in general.
And the status check, which we often call like an ops report, basically checking in about the work you've done, often brings up lots of tensions, like, oh, I have, like, whether you're seeing everyone on the same page or you're doing work accidentally, my least favorite thing, or like a ball is dropped. Those things happen too, and so those become tensions instead of figuring out in the middle. Yeah. Just to kind of hone that in. And there's a question about how often do you hold this training? And a couple people have asked that. So we hold it 3 times a year, roughly winter, spring, fall, but the application is due in those seasons and it kind of lasts longer. So this application is due April 15th and the course starts the week of May 9th. So it's kind of a spring summer course, and then in the fall applications are due in September and it starts in October. So that's give you a heads up if you're a year planner on that framework. And someone also asked, you briefly mentioned the requirement to be in alignment. What if your group is not in alignment, and what does that mean?
Yeah. Could I just like interrupt for a second? Like, I know that we're at time and a bunch of people need to jump. And I wonder if like Rebecca and I are totally cool with staying on like an extra, whatever, 10 minutes or something like that to like answer some questions. But I wonder if folks who need to go, if everyone needs to go, just wants to unmute themselves and say, hey, thanks, goodbye, or whatever, then that's great. And we could like do the official closing now. How's that sound, Rebecca?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, cool. And then folks who want to stay for a couple extra minutes, please just hang on the line. All right, well, thanks everybody. And yeah, and if you need to jump,
Yeah,
please do.
thanks for joining us and your great feedback and questions.
Thank you.
And presence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I do want to stay on to.
Okay.
Great. Well, we'll keep going then. Thanks, Daniel. That was helpful. I forgot about the time for a second. And so then the question was about alignment. How, like, what does that mean to be out of
Right.
alignment? And
Right. Yeah, good question.
what if that happens?
What if that happens? Well, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, the in what are we not aligned about? I guess there could be so many things that we could not be aligned about. Are we not aligned about this goes into one of the other like tools that we use in CoLab, which is the 7 conversations, we call it. It's like, what are these 7 broad areas of work and decision making and stuff that teams need to have, you know, like one of them is purpose, for instance. So what's our vision, mission, and values? You know, we call that the purpose conversations. And we could be out of alignment on that level and need to have discussions and conversations and decisions about, well, what is our purpose, you know? Or it might be we might be misaligned around our strategy, like what's actually most important now. What are we focused on in the shorter term, to, you know? And then so we need to have a strategy conversation to get aligned around our strategy, or whatever. Maybe we're misaligned about like who does what, and we need to have some governance conversations and some just, you know, figuring out the roles and get clear on roles and accountabilities and stuff like that within the team, you know, so that we know who's doing what. So there could be, the misalignment could happen in a lot of different places, and you know, it's going to depend on what it is, how we resolve it in a sense. But basically, like, let's talk about it and figure it out, you know, in a sense, and ideally have some process tools to kind of guide us and scaffold us and hold us in place, so that we aren't just going, well, so maybe one of the first things to get aligned about is like, could we have a process that we could all agree on so we could get further aligned, you know, for instance.
Right. Thanks, Daniel. And if you have further question, please add them. And folks at Syracuse Cultural Workers Co-op, are you suggesting that tensions are raised in the agenda created the meeting ahead of time or ahead of time?
Yes. The question was, do you sit down and you ask people to share tensions and you create the agenda then as part of the meeting, or is it done ahead of time?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah,
we generally, it happens a little bit of both. So, but we make a space for during the meeting to get any more tensions that aren't already added. So we have a Google Doc that we call the living agenda. And if I think of something during the week that I want to discuss in the meeting, I'll put it on there as my tension. But in the beginning, there's not a cutoff for when I can add something. So in the beginning, the facilitator will ask us any other tensions you want to add, and then we vote to prioritize. We may have so many things we could talk about, but we have a time frame. So we vote on what's most important, what's urgent, what's most alive for us to talk about that day. And that the group collectively votes on that. So the collective is holding how important pieces are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so a simple majority vote for that, and is voting how you make decisions generally, or do you have a consensus seeking process?
Good question. So the vote is using like a rating on the agenda items, and then they're just ordered in importance, and we get to them. It's not like everyone votes on which agenda item to keep. Do you want to explain more, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I guess,
ready.
well, I guess the even fallback answer is that we actually give the facilitator the power to decide what agendas to prioritize, right? But the facilitator often doesn't know what's actually meaningful and important to the participants necessarily. They might be a little out of touch with what the actual priorities are. So we have a little key that we put in the agenda, and ever since everyone has access to it, they just like key, like, I think this is really important, and they put an exclamation mark next to it. You know, this is like kind of urgent. We definitely should get to this today because I need this decision to move forward or something like that, right? So they put an exclamation mark next to it, and then the facilitator knows, like, okay, these things feel pretty urgent. We should probably do our best to get to them, and they decide. You know, they're the ones who decide the kind of the final order. So it's kind of a, you know, again, an autonomous power of the role of the facilitator and the collective power of the group to, in this case, mostly to inform the facilitator of what's, you know, what's meaningful to people, right? It's not a majority rule situation for in that case, but typically, but you know, a group could decide to do it differently. It's the principle still applies, and we do use a modified consensus, which we call integrative consent, which is a great tool for making decisions as a group in a way that's, you know, has the benefits of really hearing from everyone, and yet is fairly streamlined and effective at making decisions, you know, often more quickly and more nimbly than a full consensus process is often, at least as often as done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel. Great additions. And maybe we'll take one more question here, which is, would y'all be able to share the tool you mentioned about identifying which decisions are made by who? That's a big one, but Daniel, do you want to share a little bit about
Which
that?
decisions are made by who? Yeah.
I can start. I can start actually.
Go for it. What do you have to say about that?
Okay. So one of the principles of collab, which is what we name our tools under, is that people should have power over their work. So generally we organize that under roles, and the role has, it's pretty, right? A lot of groups do this, they have roles, and under that has accountabilities or what they're in charge of. And then the collective votes on giving that person power on that, elects them into it, collectively agrees. Vote isn't the best word. Collectively agrees to give that person power over these pieces of the work. And so the collective trusts this person and consents, and then it's changeable if it's not working over time. But generally our rule of thumb, if it's your work, you should have some decision-making power over it. And then we have some boundaries about where the collective meets that individual, how much power that person can make, and where the collective kind of supports and jumps in on that. Daniel, you want to add something?
Yeah, well, yeah, because I was going to the next level out, in a sense, the bigger picture, which is like what we call scopes. It's like what other organization might call work teams or circles or departments, or, you know, whatever, working groups, committees. Like, what's your word for the group level, you know, of decision making? And having a really clear delineation of what is the mission of each scope is also really clear. So a scope that has to do with, you know, whatever, marketing and communications or something, they know what their work is and what their mission is and how they can best serve the organization in that realm. And they know it's not this, and they know when they need to coordinate between, so they're not going off the rails in some other direction. So having clarity around the what we call scopes, like the scope of the work, in a sense, like the extent, you know, in a sense, that's why we use that word.
And I'll thank you, Daniel. I like how we were thinking of very related, but also micro, macro. Yeah. And when are the 10 weeks for this next group? The course starts the week of May 9th, and the schedule is set by the people in the course via Doodle. So with some Doodle magic, the schedule is really based on your schedule and other people's, of course. And it goes for 10 weeks. There's a break week in the middle. So basically till the end of July, May to July, with a break in there. And people apply at that link, which I'll put in here again. It's at the bottom of the page. And then once you apply, you interview with me to see if it's a good fit, have a conversation about what you're looking for. And then we decide how that fits, and then we go for next steps. So if you're just curious and want to know more, that's also a good way to get to know more, to see if it's a good fit. And then the next round is in the fall. So with that, it's been really great to share space with you all. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing, doing so much A for the Qs, so much answers for the questions, and looking forward to hearing what comes up for you all after this. So have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Hi, Andy. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Karen.
Just take advantage